Hi, this is Alexis Dubief with Precious Little Sleep, and today we're doing a Facebook Live on everything night weaning. I don't care if you're breastfeeding, bottle feeding, some combination therein, all of this applies to you. So I had posted a story because I'm trying to be hip and cool Instagram lady, and I got a couple of great questions which we're going to answer in a minute. But I wanted to back up a second and kind of frame out the discussion about night weaning. Why should you consider this? At which age? What do we know about it? So this is my big theme for the year for most of 2020, and unfortunately this is going to follow us into 2021. The reality is that we are living during incredible times, right? There's a global pandemic. Most of you are coming from the US. We are in a high stress, high anxiety time. And that is just the phase that we're in. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that this is a really unique time in history. This is a really unique time to be parenting. And it's very, very hard. A lot of our support and a lot of our community resources that we would normally have as parents are either not available or they are more challenging to avail ourselves of, right? So it's a really, really hard time. And I believe in naming it to taming it. So most of us, if we're being honest, are dealing with some level of depression and anxiety. And that is simply a function of the phase of life that we're in. We are parents in a pandemic. That's who we are. And I think it's important to name that because when we acknowledge this as our reality, and this is the phase of life that we are in, we can also look at what are the things that I can control to help make my life better and my family's life better, right? What can I control? There's plenty of things happening that we can't control, and that sucks. But we can't control those things. What can we control? What is going to appreciably and measurably make my life better? What's going to make my children's life better? And one of the answers to that question should be sleep, right? Because what do we know? We know that when we are sleeping better, our anxiety goes down, our health goes up, our depression goes down, our ability to emotionally self-regulate goes up. All good things happen. What happens when our kids are sleeping better? Exactly the same things for them. So again, parenting in a pandemic really highlights, in all times, sleep is really important, but parenting in a pandemic really highlights how essential it is. Because there's a whole bunch of things happening that you cannot control, but this is something you can control. So one of the things that prevents us from sleeping is feeding our kids at night, because babies eat at night. That's just the fact of life. But they don't have to. They don't have to. So why do babies eat at night? Well, for our first few months, they eat a lot at night because they don't have a well-developed circadian rhythm. They're napping 24 hours a day. They need a lot of soothing. They're very dysregulated. You're gonna have a lot of crying and a lot of fussing. They're gonna wake a lot at night. And feeding is immensely soothing. And of course they need to eat, right? But it's also immensely soothing. So when babies are newborns, we feed them a lot at night because that's a way to help keep them calm, keep them happy, ensure that they're growing. But what happens is, as babies get older, those feedings stick around like a bad souvenir from the newborn days. And why does that happen? The reason those feedings stick around is really twofold. One is, if we feed children to sleep at bedtime, if we nurse them to sleep, if we bottle feed them to sleep, if we use a pacifier, which can also teach a baby that, I only sleep with sucking, right? If we use a pacifier, bottle, human nipple, whatever, at bedtime, we're teaching those babies that sleep equals sucking, ideally with food involved. So even those pacifier babies will often do okay at bedtime with a pacifier, but come 10, 11, 12 o'clock, no more pacifier, only food, right? We've seen this time and time again. So anything that we do at bedtime teaches that infant, I only sleep with sucking and food. So when they cycle through light sleep at night, as they do, hey, it's time for more food, right? So they demand food all night for months and months and months, not because they're starving to death or because they're developmentally incapable, but because we've taught them that this is how we eat. And the other reason we wake and eat at night is because we're habituated to it. And I'm not encouraging you to do this, but hypothetically, if you set your alarm for 2 o'clock in the morning and you made yourself a giant turkey sandwich and for 5 nights in a row at 2 o'clock in the morning, you ate a giant turkey sandwich, and you stopped setting your alarm for 2 o'clock in the morning, you would actually find that you'd be hungry and you'd wake up hungry at 2 o'clock in the morning because your body would habituate to eating a large meal at 2 o'clock in the morning. And even as an adult, we can establish that habit, right? So this is something that we know, that we have sleep associations at bedtime, which lead to all-night food fasts, and we have habits that are immensely persistent, that will just stick around for months and months and months, long past the point that they're needed, biologically needed. So I did a little research. So every couple of years, I circle back around in this topic. What is the evidence? Where is the study that says when your child definitively can go through the whole night without feeding? And I'm calling a whole night like 11 hours, 10, 11 hours, no feeding. And I can never find this study. It doesn't exist, or I can't find it. If somebody else has found it and has evidence they'd like to share, I would love to hear it. But I can never find good evidence of this. When we talk about malnutrition of infants, or we talk about failure to thrive or feeding problems, those studies are not looking at privileged parents in, countries like most of us are in, which is, most of my listeners are coming from North America or Europe. So most of the studies looking at malnutrition, failure to thrive, etc., are really looking at impoverished countries where parents don't have reliable access to fresh water, not primarily those of us who are listening to this. So I don't have good evidence of this. What I do have is strong evidence that suggests that babies are capable of a 9, 10, 11 hour fast from a very early age, vastly earlier than most of us are talking about night weaning. I can confidently say that by 6 months, a healthy, thriving child is capable of an all-night fast, 100%. Most can do it much sooner than that. Some babies will self-wean all on their own at 3 months. And I'm not saying you have to stop feeding your child at night at 3 months. I'm just saying, I'm trying to answer the question, when are they capable? 100% by 6 months. And there's good evidence that they can do it a lot earlier. So we talk about night weaning as something that we really focus on for babies 6 months or older, but it's also something to consider for younger children. Also, night weaning does not have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm never going to feed my child at night, or we're going to eat 5 times a night, right? So we have these options to consider. It can be a blend. And the one thing I would strongly consider, and again, coming back to the depression and anxiety piece, which is really going to be like the drumbeat I'm going to keep coming back to, is you need 6 hours. 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep. And keep in mind that most babies go to bed earlier than we do. So if your child sleeps 6 hours, but they go to bed at 7 a.m. or 7 p.m., you're not getting 6 hours, right? Because you're probably not going to go to bed at 7. So really, when we think about 6 hours, what we need to look at is more often like 10 to 4. Like that's sort of, So then in that scenario, what we're really looking at is a baby who can go from bedtime, which might be 7:30, 7, 8 o'clock, till 4 in the morning. That would be a goal that enables a parent to also get a basic human level of sleep. Not awesome sleep, right? 6 hours is the bare minimum, but that's really our goal, 6 hours. So for most parents, practically speaking, that means no feeding until 4, maybe 3 if you go to bed early, but 10 to 4, practically speaking. And then if you're lucky, you feed at 4, and then everybody goes back to bed for another 2 hours. Okay, so that's the goal. When can you achieve this goal? At least by 6 months. At least. Probably earlier. I mean, there's definitely multiple studies where babies are sleeping through the night by 3-4 months. I've certainly worked with parents whose children are sleeping through the night by 3-4 months. Do those children thrive? Yes. Do they go into diabetic shock? No. What is diabetic shock? Diabetic shock is what happens to your baby when you're incapable of, well, any human body, not just babies, when you're incapable of storing up enough glycogen to go for a long time without food. That's what that is. That doesn't happen. So we know they can do it. Okay, so 6 hours is the goal. So if you're looking at your night feedings and you're trying to figure out where do I feed, where do I wean off of feeding, look at it from that angle. How does 6 hours happen? How does that happen? And if I'm feeding a baby at midnight or 2 a.m., that's impossible. That's impossible. So that feeding would be, for me, a real strong contender to go. So back to my whole thing. So the 2 reasons babies eat at night: we teach them to because we feed them at bedtime. Can be near to bedtime, can be to sleep, can be use of a pacifier. Anything that happens at bedtime that teaches them, oh, I need to eat to sleep, is going to lead to a lot of night feedings and habit. So step 1, if you haven't already, is to establish independent sleep. My phone keeps going to sleep here. Establish independent sleep at bedtime and remove nursing, bottle feeding, and pacifier use from anywhere near the bedtime routine, right? So that is step 1. Any night weaning has to begin with independent sleep. Precious Little Sleep Book discusses this in great detail, discusses multiple methods for how to achieve that. That is certainly something I would encourage you to pick up if you haven't already, but that is step 1. Step 2 is then looking at our night feedings and saying, okay, what's gotta go? So let's assume you already established independent sleep, because there's really no conversation if that's not happening. Then we have some pretty direct ways to do it with either bottle or breast. And in any scenario, we just want to make some gradual changes and probably picking the first feeding of the night, because the first earlier feedings are the ones that are going to keep us from sleeping that 6 hours. If we're breastfeeding, we're just going to reduce the amount of time that we're breastfeeding per side. So I like a minute aside per night. So if you're a 10-minute both breast kind of person, then it's 9 minutes, 8 minutes, 7 minutes, etc. until you get down to 2. Typically, kids stop waking up then. It's just not even worth it. With a bottle, it's easy because we have a volume. We can see it. So it's 6 ounces, 5 ounces, 4 ounces, until you get down to 1 or 2 ounces, and then we're done. So it seems straightforward. It doesn't always go smoothly, but it does 90% of the time. If it doesn't go smoothly, then we need to look at the bigger picture and figure out, why is this a struggle? Is this a struggle because I'm still nursing too close to bedtime? Is this a struggle because there's a schedule issue and my child is undertired? We kind of look at these things. Is there a problem because I'm feeding early in the night and that's resetting the sleep association that I worked so hard to get out of at bedtime? But, those are like 10% of the cases where it doesn't go well. 90% of the time, if you have established independent sleep at bedtime and you take things gradually and diligently, it's gonna go. And it's not quick, right? I mean, it's still gonna take you a week or two to get rid of 1 or 2 feedings, but we can definitely sort of chip away at it and get there. Had a couple of great questions and I wanna delve in. So thank you for sharing questions if you did. One says, my question is, how can we feel more confident that baby is getting all they need during the day after weaning? My 7-month-old is so distracted, even in the dark nursery with the sound machine on. She wants to scratch the chair and feel the look of the quilt and roll around like a drunken alligator. So when she takes 2 full feedings overnight, I feel relieved she's getting what she needs to grow. So, great question. Babies are distracted feeding during the day because they are busy. They are wanting to learn how life works. They're exploring the universe. This is the coolest thing ever. What's this chair about? What's this quilt about? What's that noise? What's the dog doing? What's my older sibling doing? All of these things are vastly more exciting than staring at your boob, right? Like boob, low exciting. So of course they're doing what they're supposed to do, which is exploring the universe, and feeding is meh. So they snack all day, basically just enough to take the edge off. By the way, I do this too. I'm also guilty of this. I'm too busy and I snack all day and then tank up at night, which is a bad system. So that's normal. You're not going to change your baby from doing that. You're not going to convince your baby that nursing is more exciting than the universe. But we have to trust our children to get what they need. It's basically what babies are best at. To not get what they need and have a failure to thrive or have a growth issue is extremely rare. Again, especially because most of us are coming from privileged countries where we have access to nutrition, clean water. We're not talking about situations where there's a food scarcity issue for most of us. So we have to trust that. The other thing is, this is a chicken and egg situation. If I'm tanking up all night, I'm not that hungry during the day. So I'm gonna keep playing with the quilt and staring around and doing other things because I don't really need to. With bottle-fed babies, we can look at it and it's very, very clear. I've worked with many families who had babies who would refuse a bottle at daycare and eat like 4 ounces through a 10-hour day. I mean, really, really tiny amounts, and then eat all of their food at night, 24, 26, 30 ounces of food at night, right? So we can see like, oh my God, like this kid is fasting all day and eating all night. That's not because they can't do better. That's just because that's their habit. And once we remove the sleep association and we remove those calories at night, shoop, they move them during the day. So if you want your child to be more interested into eating during the day, you have to take it off the list of options at night, right? Because at night, babies eat well because it's boring and there's nothing good on TV. So there's nothing else to do. So like, sure, let's eat and have a really focused feeding. But during the day, there's too many cool distractions. So if you allow them to continue that way, they'll happily do it as long as they want. But we don't want them to do that because again, pandemic, depression, anxiety, things we can control, this is one of the few areas we can make a significant improvement in our lives. So I would just have the confidence. I would have that confidence. What about when your babe went to bed without a full stomach? So this is a great question. Human bodies store glycogen throughout the day. So the ability to fast at night is not because we tank up on a huge meal just prior to going to bed. Take yourself as an example, right? Most of us eat dinner around 6, right? And then we go to bed at 10, 11, something like that. So there's already 4 to 5 hours between our last meal of the day and going to bed. That's just like a normal thing that we do. We don't, as adults, eat a giant dinner at 10:45 and then hop into bed. So we are able to store up enough glycogen throughout the entire day, right? Breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, whatever. And that's how we're able to go from 6 p.m. at night, right, dinner time, till 8 a.m., 14 hours a day, no problem. We're not waking up starving. We don't, have hunger cramps when we're sleeping at night because we store up food throughout the entire day. It's not just what happens prior to bed. And the same is true for babies. But instead we have this sense of, oh no, I need to jam pack them. I got to stuff them like a turkey just prior to bedtime. Otherwise they're incapable. That's just not how bodies work. Also keep in mind, most of the babies we're talking about have a largely liquid diet, which empties really quickly. It doesn't stick around in our stomach very long. So whether they have 2 ounces at bedtime or 8 ounces at bedtime, within a couple of hours, most of that's flushed out. So your child's sleeping through the night because their body has stored up sugars throughout the day from eating all day long, and that's how they're able to sleep. It's not about like, I gotta stuff them like a turkey just at bedtime. So, if we think about the division of responsibility, it's your job to provide your child with opportunities to eat throughout the day. That's your job. It's their job to eat or not eat. And I know when they're babies, we think, oh, no, I have to stuff them like a turkey. No, at all ages, it's your job to provide food and it's their job to choose to eat or not eat. And that's gotta be something that we allow them to do and figure out and to trust. So that when they're 3 and they refuse to eat dinner, okay, you didn't like dinner. Sorry to hear that. We'll have a nice bowl of oatmeal at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. That's it, right? So when they're 3, we have that conversation. When they're 9 months and they refuse to have a big feeding session before bedtime, that's their choice. So it's not about that meal just before, the meal just before bedtime is not as essential as you think. It really isn't. But great question. All right, my almost 4-month-old has been doing 1 night feed for a few weeks between 4 to 6 a.m., which is great, right? So that's a mom who's getting the opportunity to have 6, sometimes longer hours of sleep. She slept through completely a couple of times. So, is this a child who is capable of a 10, 11-hour fast? Yeah, she's shown us. She's absolutely capable. He goes down independently with nursing ending 30 minutes before bed. Awesome. The last few nights he has woken earlier and earlier, and a couple of times woke twice to eat. Why is my phone turning off? Last night, 1:30. Is this an issue with sleep? Am I okay to let him figure it out since I know he's capable of going longer? So yes, you're okay to let him figure it out, but I would be curious as to why is he waking up earlier? So beautiful sleep hygiene, right? Falling asleep independently, nursing is separated from bedtime, wonderful. All great stuff, gold star. Why is he waking up earlier? He's gone till 4 to 6 for a while and he slept through the night a couple of times. So if I were looking at this, the things I would be curious about would be, Is this a child falling asleep and completely independently, or is there something going on? Like we rock until they're super drowsy. Like, are we using a pacifier at bedtime? I would start poking around what's happening at bedtime. Is there something going on? The other thing I would look about is undertired. Undertired can manifest with night wakings. So, I mean, she says bedtime is 9:15, which is not uncommon, right? Younger babies often have a later bedtime. So I would look at how much sleep are they getting during the day? How long is their night sleep? What if this kid is, taking huge naps? What if this child has a late evening nap? Because at 4 months, we still have late naps, right? What if he's napping until 8, right? What if he's napping until 7:30? And the night wakings are a sign that he's kind of outgrowing the need of some of this sleep, and we need to actually expand wake times or reduce napping a little bit so his sleep drive comes up. Because the night feedings may not actually be about hunger. They may be a sign that his sleep drive is too low. And we need to be sleepy to fall asleep and stay asleep. So a child who has sufficient sleep drive will both fall and stay asleep. This is a child who's rocking the falling asleep, which is brilliant, but he's struggling with the staying asleep. So the question is why? So yes, you can let him figure it out, but I would also kind of poke around in there and go, is there a reason why this change has happened? Okay, another great question. My 9-month-old has been reverse cycling since he was 5 months old, and I very much want a night wean, but don't want him to be hungry. So reverse cycling is a term that loosely defines a baby who's just feeding a lot at night. That used to be applied to newborns. It kind of is a little bit meaningless. So let me just break it down. So newborns eat a lot at night because they don't have a well-developed circadian rhythm, so they're napping throughout the day. They're basically taking a nap, wake for a few hours, taking a nap, wake for a few hours, all day long. So the night for a newborn is basically just more of daytime. It's just continuing that cycle around the clock. And so what you have is a kid who's awake and unhappy for 2 hours in the middle of the night, and people are like, and they feed a lot because it's very soothing and calming. And so, we're just trying to keep the peace and get through the night as best we can while this circadian rhythm kind of clicks in. So anyway, so that's often referred to as reverse cycling. When you have a 9-month-old who's eating a ton at night and has since 5 months, again, I don't know anything else about this person's story, but 5 months is often when sleep associations at bedtime blow up on you, right? That is 4 to 6 months is when that happens. So without any more information, my best guess is this is a kid who is eating to sleep or eating near to sleep. And that sleep association at 9 months has now blown up into a full-blown night feeding problem. That's really, really common. You are not alone in this. Because what happens is with younger babies, you can feed them at bedtime and they sleep just fine. And you go, great, this is a winning strategy. And we can keep doing it because we're like, hey, I nurse to sleep and they go down for 9 hours. How great is this? And then around 4, 5, 6 months, their brains are exploding and they're forming connections all over the place and they're figuring out how the world works. And they go, hey, I nursed to sleep at bedtime, so now every time I cycle through light sleep, I need that to fall back asleep. Or I had a bottle at bedtime and now I'm waking up for a bottle all night long. And people assume there's a problem, that they're teething, that it's a growth spurt, that it's a regression, that it's separation anxiety, that it's the new daycare, that it's whatever. And the truth is, it all comes back to basic sleep hygiene. If you fall asleep eating, you're going to wake up all night demanding to eat. So the fact that this happened at 5 months sounds like that's probably what's going on. So in terms about night weaning, but you don't want to be hungry, step 1 is we got to make sure he's falling asleep independently, and we have to remove nursing, feeding, bottles, pacifier, all of it from the bedtime routine, right? So a great bedtime routine is last feeding of the day happens at least 20, 30 minutes before bedtime. Then we do our wonderful routine. We do our bath and our massage and our songs and our books and our cool jammies and lotion and all the great things that we do. But none of that is involving food, right? So that's all, we're done at 7 and then 7:30 is bedtime. And then between 7 and 7:30, we do all these other wonderful things, but food is not a part of that. So I'm guessing that's what's going on there, if I had to guess. How do I know if they're experiencing pain from teething? Should you comfort them if you're night weaning? I'm looking for strategies, especially when other members of the household are trying to sleep. A lot of great questions here, so let's break it down. How do you know if they're experiencing teething pain? You guess. Typically though, teething pain is 24 hours a day. So if you're seeing behaviors that only happen at night, it's probably not teething. So teething is an all-day issue. So if you have a kid who's like drooling furiously, super duper fussy, sticking everything possible into their mouth at all hours of the day, that's teething. And if you feel you want to medicate, I would talk to your pediatrician about what's appropriate and do that. If you proactively medicate, at least then, if you're seeing behaviors at night, you can confidently or semi-confidently go, well, it's not teething. I know parents don't believe this. I didn't either. All of the studies say that teething does not impact sleep. All of the science we have says it doesn't. I don't know. I don't want to fight the fight about teething. If you're worried, talk to your pediatrician, medicate. Because nothing you can do for teething other than medication is going to fix it, right? That's just kind of the nature of teething. Should you comfort them if you're trying to night wean? Well, if we remove the sleep association from bedtime and we're taking things gradually, there typically isn't a whole lot of need for additional comforting, right? So there shouldn't be a whole lot of need for additional comforting. Sometimes when you get down to 1-2 ounces in the bottle or a quick feeding, and then we stop going through hey, we're done with that feeding, sometimes there is some brief upset for maybe a night or two as we get used to not waking up at that time. It's typically not that dramatic. It typically does not require an immense amount of parental intervention. If for some reason your kid was really a boob or bottle kid who's now really pissed at you and you felt like you had to provide some soothing, you could go in there briefly. I would be really stingy about it. I wouldn't go nuts in there. And if a parent is going to go into the child's room, ideally it's not the nursing parent if you're a nursing family. So as long as you're not a single parent, if there's another person around who could help with that, that's when they would step up and say, okay, I'm going to handle all the night wakings now, because if the nursing parent shows up, especially for some babies are really into the boob, if the nursing parent shows up, they're going to be like, great, let's do this. And you're going to say, hey buddy, no, it's time for sleep. And they're going to get furious with you. So if your goal is night weaning and you're a nursing parent, ideally you're not the one doing any kind of night visit, check-ins, diaper changes, whatever. And then the last question is, she goes, especially when other members of the household are trying to sleep. So listen, I don't want to be unsympathetic. So when we talk about depression, anxiety, and pandemic parenting, that applies to all members of the household. Older siblings, spouses, other family members who may live there. Everyone is struggling at some level today. Everyone. So I don't want to be dismissive of the need for other people in the household to also get good sleep, right? It's important for all of us, not just the parents. All members of the household deserve and have a right to get good sleep. So we do want to night parent from a place that is as mindful of the needs of the whole family and other members of the household as possible. But I also think it's fair to say that night weaning, typically is a relatively smooth affair if we've set ourselves up for success by changing what happens at bedtime. And B, even if there is some mild complaint, it's typically not significant and it's brief. We're talking about a couple of nights here, not forever. So we can't night parent from a place of trying to ensure our child never makes a noise, right? In whatever we're dealing with, there's lots of things that happen at night, but we can't parent from a place where we're my job is to make sure my child never makes a noise because it's going to disrupt other people's sleep, older siblings, grandma, whoever living there. Because if our goal is to ensure our child never makes a noise, that's going to lead us down a path, there'd be dragons, right? So a lot of parents get stuck because they're I don't want them waking up my older sibling. I don't want my husband has a really high stress job. I don't want them waking up my husband. And that leads us to do a whole bunch of things because now we're so afraid of noise or disruption that we're running in there at the slightest peep or the slightest grumble. And so I think as long as our plan is solid, any night noise or disruption that we might be experiencing should be brief and temporary. So I think in that case, we need to accept it and say, okay, hey, listen, we're making some changes. It's going to set us all up for success. It's going to help me sleep better. It's going to help you sleep better. It's going to help my kids sleep better. So there might be some noise in the next couple of nights because he's not really happy when I'm only giving him 2 ounces instead of 4 ounces. And we're all going to have to deal with it. We can use white noise. You can sleep downstairs if you need to, make some adjustments so that maybe it's less disruptive to other members of the family. But you can't let noise drive how you parent. We just can't. And that's true for everything. So kids are noisy. If you live in a household with kids, there's going to be noise. That's the nature of that beast. So just to recap, I would strongly encourage you to night wean. You don't have to. I mean, it's an individual choice. Every parent has to make their own decision. But anything that is keeping you from at least 6 hours, and that's a low bar. 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep needs to go. Really strongly consider that it needs to go. And that if your child is older than 3-4 months and they're growing, thriving, full term, your pediatrician has given you the green light, what is the cost benefit analysis here? Well, the cost to continue all these night feedings is that we're all chronically sleep deprived, which is linked to depression, anxiety, which we're all suffering with anyway. Well, what's the benefit? If we can get 6+ hours of uninterrupted sleep, we're going to be healthier emotionally, physically. Our children will thrive. The whole family benefits from this. So, it's hard to come up with a really good argument for keeping the night feedings, and it's pretty easy to come up with an argument to get rid of them. And your child is capable, and it's something you can start today, and the whole family will benefit from it. So please consider this. Again, even in the before times, it was really important, but today it's even doubly so. So thanks for joining in today, and that's my pitch for night weaning.